Good morning, Pastor Ron Jetter, Immanuel Lutheran Church, Grandview, Washington. It is Wednesday, Hump Day, the 27th of January. So today I'm doing a Wednesday message and a 4 p.m. Bible study because my days are numbered. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 3 more messages, and then Sunday services, and that's it. Retirement. I will be 65 at the first part of March, and 1st of February officially retired again for the second time, as we have a new pastor starting up that day, next Monday, the 1st of February. It's all about the numbers, and we're in the book of Numbers, and chapter 7 of the book of Numbers enumerates the gifts that the leaders of each of the 12 geographic tribes gave to God via the priesthood, that is to say, the Levites. Wagons and gold and lampstands and finery and jewels. I mean, this is an ancient society, and yet they have all this wealth still. They had the golden calf, and yet they've still got more. They were forbidden from wearing ornaments, and all those golden jewels are sitting hidden away somewhere, and now they're donating them again, as well as all of the animals. And it goes through a long list of the names of those making the offerings and of those making the offerings. And when you read this, you go, how was this part of an oral tradition? Well, obviously, there was a scribe. Someone was writing all of this down. There was a written record. There had to be. It's not the kind of thing you could memorize and pass down like a Hansel and Gretel or Hans Christian Andersen or Brothers Grimm or one of the stories where the details don't matter. This one was all about giving people credit for what they offered and which tribe did the offering, which tribe got the credit for the offering. So that when the work was compiled into what we have as the Torah or the Pentateuch, those written scrolls were then taken and inserted into the book of Numbers in order that there might be that record. Halfway through the 40 years, perhaps, we aren't sure, maybe farther down than that. Chapter 8 then shifts over to the actual temple or the tabernacle. And it says in the first few verses there that there will be 7 lamps on 7 lampstands. We have numbers like 4 and 7, which figure prominently throughout Numbers. And there's this science called, or maybe it's a kind of a made-up science, but it's called numerology. And it's especially popular with people who like to sell books to the gullible. And generally the way it works is you'll take a bunch of Bible verses that are not related or that may be related, and you'll blow them out of all proportion, and you'll come up with a date when the 4 great beasts, and you'll give them names like China and Russia and so on, and then the great eagle, which is obviously the United States, right? God's champion. And then you'll set a date, and you'll have a book, and you'll sell as many books before that date comes, because after the date comes and the world doesn't end, well, I have books on my shelf that I have written, and they're sci-fi and they're futuristic, and I'm hoping that they'll continue to sell. They're not numerology. I'm not trying to manipulate people into buying a book, convincing them the world's going to end. Reminds me of the poem, some say the world will end in fire, some in ice. And it's a Robert Frost poem. I love that poem, Fire and Ice. Yeah, anyway, numerology. The book of Revelation has numbers 4 and 7 in it prominently. There are 7 lampstands. And these numbers will keep coming up. 7, the number of days in a week, is a complete cycle for time. And then we hear the thing, a week's worth of years, 7 years. And 7 weeks of 7 years plus 1 is a jubilee, 50 years. So we have 7 lamps. Why 7? Well, again, 1 for each day of the week. Then we have the consecration of the Levites. And I find this part interesting. The Levites, of course, are set aside. They are different than all the Israelites. We know that. There are the 12 geographic tribes, and then there are the Levites, purified and set aside to be the priests. But verse 23, we get a little more specific. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, this applies to the Levites. From 25 years old and upward, they shall begin to do duty in the service of the tent of the meeting. And from age 50 years, they shall retire from the duty of service no more. They may assist their brothers in the tent of meeting in carrying out their duties, but they shall perform no service. So, Levites have a 25-year working life, a 25-year career. The first 25 years is spent in training. That's not unlike how we train pastors today. I was a little older than that. Our master's program back then was a 4-year master's, 3 academic years and an internship, but some people did a concurrent internship along with starting because some small churches needed them. And so they were 25. However, none of us are retiring at 50, maybe changing careers, but not retiring. My goodness, who's young enough or who's got enough assets? But the Levites were taken care of by the other 12 tribes. They didn't have to worry about that. At 50, they could retire and live a life of relative comfort. No other tribe, no other occupation is allowed to retire. But this really seems to be the first mention of the concept of retirement. And it goes clear back to, I don't know, 1200, 1300 BCE. Wow, a long, long time ago. Then in chapter 9, we jump back, and it goes back to the first month of the second year after they had come out of Egypt. This is a restatement of what we already heard in the book of Leviticus about the celebration of the first Passover in the wilderness, the cloud and the fire at the tabernacle, at the tent of meeting, silver trumpets, and we have already heard when the trumpets shall be blown, when there is an assembly. Incidentally, this was one of the things that was adopted by Islam, the blowing of the trumpet or the sounding of the horn to call you to prayer. That's how the Jews knew it was time to come, or back then the Israelites, all of them. They knew it was time to come outside to the front of their tent and bow down and face toward the tent of meeting. So ancient practices. Then I love chapter 11 rather. Now we get back to the story that's more like the book of Exodus. Now when the people complained in the hearing of the Lord about their misfortunes, the Lord heard, and his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned against them and consumed some outlying parts of the camp. But the people cried to Moses, and Moses prayed to the Lord, and the fire abated. So the place was called Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burned against them. The rabble among them had strong cravings, and the Israelites also wept again. If only we had meat to eat. Remember the fish we used to eat in Egypt for nothing. Nothing, they were slaves. The cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. I love this because it says what was part of their diet while they were in Egypt. They wouldn't have been mentioned if these things weren't present then. We know a lot of foods, as I've said, are typical or indigenous to this continent, to the Western Hemisphere. Potatoes, a lot of the peppers, the berries, a lot of the squash that we eat. But they have melons, they have leeks and onions, cucumbers. There we go. And of course they had fish, and they had goats and sheep and cattle. Now the manna was like coriander seed. color of gum resin. The people went around and gathered it. So now it's retelling the gathering of the manna. And then it's retelling the story of God and Moses and the people and this struggle again. Is it happening all over again, or is it simply a reminder? Is the writer of the book of Numbers simply trying to make sure that this next generation understands what that first generation went through? Well, now we've got the 70 elders mentioned again, and the 70 elders, of course, comes from way before. And then we have the story of Eldad and Medad. This is where we'll take it up tomorrow. Eldad and Medad, because they are people whose names get quoted. Eldad and Medad made it into the children's Bibles.